She pressed the gloves onto Imani's hands herself. Not handed them over, pressed them on. Slow, deliberate. The way you handle something you've already decided is dirty. Bex stood in the middle of that dining room, diamonds at her throat, guests watching from every angle, and she smiled the entire time. Not a cruel smile, worse, a casual one. The kind that tells you the person wearing it doesn't think they're doing anything wrong. The kind that says this is just how things work. We don't want your smell on the food, Yuna said, and the room laughed. Imani Brooks stood there, 31 years old. 2 years of her life poured into that kitchen. Her hands now inside, a pair of latex gloves. She hadn't needed 30 seconds ago, and she did not cry. She would not give them that. But her jaw tightened, and something deep inside. Her chest went very, very quiet. The kind of quiet that isn't peace. The kind that comes right before a person decides they are done. What nobody in that room knew, what nobody bothered to wonder, was that someone else was watching from above, and he had heard every word. If this story already has your heart racing, you are exactly who this channel was made for. Before we go any further, hit that subscribe button right now, because stories like this one are what we do here, every single week. Tap the like button, and drop a comment telling me what city or country you're watching from. I want to see just how far this story travels. Don't go anywhere. This is only the beginning. The estate sat behind iron gates on a hillside above Bel Air, the kind of property that doesn't appear on real estate listings because it is never needed to. It had been in the Seo family for 11 years, purchased quietly, renovated extensively, and staffed with a precision that most corporations would envy. 12 full-time employees, a rotating security detail. A head groundskeeper who had worked for 3 different owners and never once gossiped about any of them. And then there was Imani. She had come to the estate on a Tuesday afternoon in February, almost 2 years earlier, carrying a portfolio printed on paper she couldn't really afford, and wearing the only blazer she owned that didn't have a frayed collar. The interview was supposed to last 45 minutes. It lasted 2 hours and 20 minutes, and by the end of it, the estate manager, a precise Korean-American woman named Mrs. Cho, had walked Imani through every corner of the kitchen and asked her to taste 3 different stocks that had been simmering since morning and tell her what was missing. Imani had tasted each one, set the spoon down carefully between samples, then said, "The second one needs white pepper, not black," in about 4 more minutes. "The third one is fine, but whoever made it was afraid of salt." Mrs. Cho had looked at her for a long moment. "When can you start?" That kitchen became Imani's world. Not in a romantic way, not in the way people describe passion in speeches. In the real way, the way that means you're still standing in it at 11:30 at night because a guest changed their dietary restrictions 3 hours before dinner, and you're rebuilding an entire course from scratch without telling anyone how much it costs you. The way that means you know which burners run hot and which shelf in the walk-in refrigerator has a temperature drift of 2 degrees and why that matters when you're resting proteins. The way that means the kitchen knows you back, and you stop being a visitor in it. She had cooked for senators. She had fed the kind of men who didn't have Wikipedia pages because they preferred it that way. She had quietly managed 2 kitchen emergencies that, if handled badly, would have embarrassed this SEO name in front of people whose goodwill the family needed. She had never asked for credit. She had never complained to anyone outside the staff. She had shown up every single day, and she had done it while carrying a number she never shared out loud, $83,000. Her mother's medical debt, accumulated over 4 years of a kidney condition that didn't kill you fast but cost you constantly. Dialysis 3 times a week. Medications. The kind of bills that don't arrive all at once but in a steady, relentless drip that teaches you to check your account balance before you check your messages in the morning. Money's salary at the estate was the best she had ever earned. And every dollar she didn't need for her half of the rent, she shared a 2-bedroom apartment in Inglewood with a woman named Dija, who worked night shifts, went toward 2 things, the debt and the dream. 22 seats. That was the restaurant she had been building inside her head since she was 19 years old and watching her grandmother cook in a kitchen. So small 2 people couldn't stand in it at the same time. 22 seats meant intimate. It meant every dish mattered because there was nowhere to hide behind volume. It meant the kind of place where people came back, not because it was trendy, but because the food reminded them of something real. She had a name for it. She had a logo sketched on the back of a utility bill envelope that lived in the drawer beside her bed. She had a neighborhood in mind, Limert Park, close enough to her mother, busy enough on weekends. She had 47,000 saved. She needed 80 to open it properly. Not lavishly, properly. With a used hood vent that actually worked, and a second-hand walk-in and a liquor license, and enough operating capital to survive the first 6 months while people figured out she existed. $33,000 away from the life she was building toward. That number lived in her body the way a small stone lives in a shoe, always there, always dazes, reminding her what was at stake every time she swallowed something she shouldn't have to swallow. The engagement dinner had been planned for 6 weeks. It was, objectively, one of the most demanding events Imani had catered in her professional life. 14 courses, 43 guests, 3 dietary restrictions she'd identified, 2 she'd discovered accidentally through staff conversation and quietly accommodated anyway, and 1 guest with a shellfish allergy so severe that Imani had rearranged her entire prep workflow to prevent cross-contamination, even though she'd never met the woman and wasn't sure she'd even be thanked for it. She had been in the kitchen since 5:30 that morning. By 7 in the evening, 11 courses had gone out. The room had gone quiet in the specific way. Rooms go quiet when the food is so good that conversation stops feeling necessary. Imani had heard it from the kitchen, that particular lull, and felt the small private satisfaction of knowing she'd done something right. Not pride, exactly. Steadier than that. The confirmation of competence. Then the doors opened, and Yuna Beck walked into the kitchen. Imani had met Yuna twice before, both times briefly, both times in passing. She knew the broad strokes, Korean heiress, educated in Switzerland, beautiful in the kind of way that photographs well at every angle, engaged to Seo Joon-Hyuk for 8 months. She had heard through the quiet channels that run between household staff that Yuna had opinions about how the estate was managed, that she had suggested more than once that certain staff members were unnecessary, that she had a habit of walking through spaces she hadn't been invited into and commenting on what she found there. When Yuna walked into the kitchen that evening, she did not say hello. She stood in the center of the room, looked at the plated courses waiting to go out, and said, "Why does it smell like this in here?" Imani put down the spoon she was holding. "It smells like food," she said. "We're finishing the final 3 courses." "It smells heavy," Yunta said. She walked toward the nearest station and looked at the plates. "These are too much. They look like cafeteria food." Imani said nothing. "My mother's chef plates with more elegance." And he's 70 years old. Still nothing. Yuna turned and looked at Imani directly for what felt like the first time. Something shifted in her expression. Not cruelty yet, more like assessment. The kind of look that measures a person and assigns them a category. "Fine," she said. "Send them out. But I want you in the dining room when the last course is served. I want the family to see who's been preparing their food." Imani thought she understood what that meant. She thought it was about presentation, the chef taking a moment in the room, the way some hosts like to do. She had done it before. It didn't bother her. She didn't understand yet what Yuna had actually decided. The dining room was warm and loud when Imani carried the final course through the doors. 43 people around a table that had been dressed with more care than most weddings. The chandelier above them threw light that made everything look slightly golden, slightly expensive, slightly unreal. Voices layered over each other in English and Korean, and the particular hybrid of both that people fall into when they've spent enough time around each other. She was 3 steps into the room when Yuna's voice cut across everything. "Ah, here she is." The room didn't go quiet all at once. It quieted in sections, like a wave pulling back. Heads turned. Imani stopped moving. Yuna stood at the head of the table, beside Joon-Hyuk's empty chair. He had not yet arrived, was expected later in the evening, and she was smiling. The specific smile Imani would come to know in the next few minutes. The casual one. "Everyone, this is the woman who's been cooking for you tonight." She paused. "Look at her." Someone laughed. Not loud. Low, unsure, like they weren't certain yet what they were laughing at. "She came very enthusiastically dressed," Yuna said. Imani was wearing her chef's uniform, the one she wore every single night she worked in this house. White jacket, black pants, non-slip shoes. Clean, professional. Standard. It's a kitchen uniform, Imani said. Her voice was steady. Yuna tilted her head. For a woman your size, you'd think there'd be more effort. There it was. The room went a different kind of quiet. Not the food quiet, the held breath kind. Imani put the platter down on the nearest surface. Her hands were controlled. She had learned, working in kitchens since she was 17, how to make her hands do what she needed them to do, regardless of what was happening in the rest of her body. Her hands were fine. The rest of her was somewhere between fury and a cold, nauseating recognition. This is who this person is, and I am standing in her house, and there are 40 people watching. The final course, she said to no one in particular, because you had to say something. Before you serve, Yuna said, and she turned to a woman sitting nearby, one of her friends. Imani gathered, because of the way they angled toward each other. Would you mind? The gloves are on the sideboard. The friend fetched them. Yuna brought them to Imani herself, and then she pressed them onto Imani's hands. Slowly, the way you do when you want a room to watch. She smoothed each finger down with her own. Her expression was attentive, almost gentle, the way someone looks when they're demonstrating a skill to a child. We don't want your smell on the food, Yuna said, and her voice was light, pleasant even. You understand. She said it like a preference, like she was asking for sparkling water instead of still. Imani looked at her. She thought about the $83,000. She thought about $33,000 more. She thought about her mother sitting in a dialysis chair 3 times a week, and the fact that this job was the reason that chair got paid for. She put on the gloves. A man at the far end of the table laughed first, then 2 women. Then a sound traveled around the room that wasn't quite laughter, more the release of something that had been building. The permission to look, the permission to find it amusing that a woman was standing in the middle of a grand dining room with latex gloves being smoothed onto her hands by the woman who would soon own this house. And the woman in the gloves was not going to fight back, because people like her didn't fight back in rooms like this. That was the understanding in the room. That was the agreement. Imani picked up the platter. She began to serve. She moved around the table with the mechanical precision of someone whose body is performing a job while the rest of them goes somewhere else. She did not look at faces. She focused on plates. She set food down correctly, from the left, angled the way she'd been trained a decade ago in a kitchen that no longer existed. She did not spill anything. She did not drop anything. Her hands, the traders, the professionals, did not shake. But inside her chest, something was happening that she couldn't quite name. It wasn't grief exactly. It wasn't anger exactly. It was more like watching something you had built very carefully get touched by someone who didn't know what it was, and understanding that they never would, and that the not knowing was the point. The contempt wasn't specific. It wasn't about anything she'd done. It was about what she was, how she looked, where she stood in relation to the people in this room. She was scenery to them. She was a prop in an event. The gloves made that visible. They made it a performance. She had almost completed the circuit of the table when Joon-Hyuk's aunt, a thin woman in her late 60s, with a very straight spine and the kind of face that had probably always been difficult, lifted a plate and held it out toward Imani without looking at her. This one, the aunt said. She touched the rim. Imani looked at the plate. She had not touched the rim. I'll bring you a replacement, Imani said. You should have been more careful. The aunt set the plate down and pushed it half an inch away from herself, as if distancing from it. Someone nearby nodded in agreement. Someone else said something in Korean that Imani didn't fully catch, but caught enough of to understand was not a compliment. She went back to the kitchen. She brought a replacement plate, came back to the table. A man she recognized as one of Joon-Hyuk's younger cousins, mid-20s, expensive haircut, the specific confidence of someone who had never once paid a bill he hadn't wanted to pay, looked up at her as she set the plate down and said, "You know, you should be grateful. Not everyone gets to be inside a house like this." He said it pleasantly, the way you'd say nice weather today. Imani set the plate down. She straightened up. She was 31 years old, and she had been told, in various ways, by various people, in various rooms, that she should be grateful for whatever table they let her stand beside. She had been told it with words and without words. She had been told it by the hostess, who addressed her staff by their job titles instead of their names. By the dinner guests, who watched her clear plates without making eye contact. By every room that made her feel like a function rather than a person. She knew the speech. She could have given it herself by now. She didn't say any of it. "Enjoy your dinner," she said. And she went back to the kitchen. She stood at the prep counter, with her hands flat on the cool metal surface. And she breathed. Just breathed. In through the nose, out through the mouth, the way her grandmother had taught her when she was 7 years old, and upset about something she couldn't fix. Count the breath, baby. Don't count the problem. She counted. She got to 6. Then Mrs. Cho came into the kitchen with a look on her face that Imani had never seen before, and Imani understood immediately that whatever had been happening in the dining room had not ended. "You need to come back out," Mrs. Cho said. "I'm done serving." Imani kept her voice level. "The courses are finished. Ms. Baek has requested your presence for..." Mrs. Cho stopped. She pressed her lips together. She was a precise woman who chose words carefully, and the fact that she was struggling with them told Imani everything. "She has something she'd like to present." Imani looked at her. "Mrs. Cho," her voice was quiet. "What is it?" Mrs. Cho looked at the floor, just for a second. But that second was enough. "An apron," she said. Imani walked back into the dining room. Yuna was standing near the head of the table with a folded piece of fabric in her hands. White. Utility. The kind of apron you bought in bulk for a cleaning staff. She was holding it the way you hold a gift, front-facing, both hands, like she was about to present something to a child on a birthday. "We thought you might appreciate something more appropriate," Yuna said. She stepped forward and held the apron against Imani's body, pressed it there, like she had pressed the gloves, held it at Imani's waist while 2 or 3 phones came up around the table, while people turned toward each other with small, delighted expressions, while someone said something under their breath, and someone else laughed openly, now no longer trying to be subtle about it. "You should dress for the position you actually belong in," Yuna said. She was smiling. The whole room was looking. And Imani was standing there with a maid's apron, pressed against her body by a woman who had probably never washed a single dish in this house, in front of 40 people who had eaten the food she had spent 14 hours preparing, and not one of them, not one was going to say a word. Her hands took the apron. She wasn't sure when she decided to take it. She would think about that later, in the dark of her apartment, and not be able to answer it cleanly. Part of it was habit. Part of it was the number. Part of it was the simple, exhausted logic that when a room has decided something about you and you are alone inside it, sometimes you take the apron just to get the moment over with, because surviving the moment is the only goal you have left. She took it. She stood there holding it. And from somewhere above the room, from the balcony that ran along the upper level of the estate, the one that looked down over the dining room, through an architectural gap in the ceiling that most guests never noticed, a voice came down. Low. Calm. It took a second to even register as a sound. She already is. The laughter stopped. It didn't fade. It didn't trail off. It stopped, like a hand over a mouth. Imani looked up. He was standing at the balcony railing in a dark jacket, one hand resting on the wood, looking down at the room with an expression that was impossible to read from this angle. She had seen Seo Joon-Hyuk exactly 4 times in 2 years of working in his house. 3 of those times had been brief. He had not been at any of the estate events she'd catered. He had been, as far as she could tell, a name on a paycheck and a voice his staff spoke about carefully. He was supposed to arrive at 10. It was 8:47. He had been standing up there long enough to see all of it. Nobody at the table was looking at Yuna anymore. They were all looking at him. And the way they were looking at him, the way even Yuna's expression shifted, very slightly, in a direction that looked a lot like the first edge of fear, told Imani something she filed away, without processing yet. The man who owned this house had walked in without announcing himself. He had watched everything. And whatever came next, it was going to change the temperature of the entire room. Imani stood very still, holding the apron, looking up at the balcony. Her heart was pounding. She noticed that. She noticed it the same way you notice a car alarm going off 2 blocks away, present, insistent, not yet close enough to act on. She waited. Joon-Hyuk moved away from the railing. She heard his footsteps on the staircase. She heard the room begin to breathe differently, and she thought clearly, distinctly, the way only the mind works in the seconds before something shifts. I don't know what happens next. But whatever it is, I am still standing here. She was still holding the apron. She set it down on the nearest chair. Nobody said a word. The footsteps reached the bottom of the stairs. The dining room doors, which had been open all evening, were still open. But, somehow, in the 10 seconds it took Seo Joon-Hyuk to cross from the stairs to the entrance of the dining room, the open doors felt like the most significant thing in the space. Like the room understood, before any of the people in it did, that the time for leaving had just closed. He stopped at the threshold. He looked at the room. Then he looked at Imani. He did not look at her the way the rest of them had looked at her all evening. He did not assess. He did not measure. He just looked the way you look at, something you recognize, something you have been thinking about, something you came here specifically to understand. His face was very still. "Miss Brooks," he said. "Not the chef, not her. Her name." The room moved slightly, almost imperceptibly, the way a boat moves when something large passes beneath it. Imani straightened her spine. "Mr. Seo," she said. He nodded once. Then he walked into the dining room, and the people who had been laughing 15 minutes ago went very, very quiet. Because the man who paid for every single thing in that room, every crystal glass, every piece of art, every thread in the tablecloth, every chair leg they were currently sitting in, was now among them. And the look on his face was not the look of a man who was pleased with what he had seen. The aunt with the straight spine put her hands in her lap. The cousin with the expensive haircut looked at his plate. Yuna set down her champagne flute, and Imani, still standing, still upright, still wearing latex gloves she hadn't needed, and holding the memory of an apron she hadn't earned. Imani waited. She had been waiting for 2 years. She could wait another few minutes. But something had changed in the room, in the air, in the particular weight of the silence, power that follows a power shift, in a space that didn't expect one. And for the first time all evening, for the first time in a very long time, she did not feel like the smallest person in the room. Joon-Hyuk did not rush. That was the first thing Imani noticed, the way he moved through the room without urgency, without theater. He wasn't performing his entrance. He was just present in it, the way a weather system is present, the way something large and inevitable occupies a space before you've fully registered that it's there. He walked to the head of the table, pulled out the chair that had been empty all evening, and sat down. He did not look at Yuna. He looked at the table. Specifically, he looked at the apron Imani had set on the nearest chair. He looked at it for exactly 2 seconds. Then he looked away. But those 2 seconds did something to the room that no speech could have done. They told everyone present that he had seen it, cataloged it, and was deciding what it meant. And the deciding was not finished. "Someone bring me water," he said. His voice was flat, not unkind, not performatively cold, just flat, the way a surface is flat before you put anything on it. One of the servers, a young man named Daniel, who had been standing against the far wall for most of the evening, trying to be invisible, moved immediately. He brought a glass, set it down, stepped back. Joon-Hyuk picked it up, drank, set it back down. The table watched him, the way prey watches something that hasn't decided yet whether it's hungry. Yuna recovered first. She was, Imani would later think, genuinely skilled at recovery. She had the kind of beauty that functioned as armor, and the kind of upbringing that had trained her to treat every social situation like a room she already owned. She moved to the chair beside Joon-Hyuk's, her chair, the fiancé's chair, and sat with the practiced ease of someone who understood that posture is a language, and she was fluent in it. "You're early," she said. She made it sound like a compliment. "I'm exactly when I said I'd be," Joon-Hyuk said. "You heard wrong." Yuna smiled. "I must have." She reached for her champagne. "The dinner was wonderful. Your chef outdid herself." The word "your" landed with a precision Imani didn't think was accidental. Joon-Hyuk's eyes moved across the table. Not to Yuna. Across the table, taking inventory, the faces, the arrangement of empty plates, the phones that had been set face down with a speed that told him exactly what they'd been used for recently. "Did she?" he said. It wasn't a question. It didn't have the shape of one. He picked up his fork, looked at the final course that had been placed at his setting, and set the fork back down without touching the food. "I want to ask the room something," he said. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved, except the aunt with the straight spine, who made the specific mistake of shifting in her chair, and that small sound, the scrape of wood against wood, seemed very loud in the room. The 14-course menu tonight, Joon-Hyuk said. Who put it together? Silence. Who planned it? More silence. Who tasted every dish 3 times before any of you sat down? Who adjusted the 4th course at 11 in the morning because one of you sent a message at 10:58 saying you'd gone pescatarian and didn't feel like mentioning it earlier? He let that sit. Who did that? Imani was still standing near the far wall. She had not moved to leave, and she had not moved closer. She existed in a middle-distance present, accounted for, not sure yet what she was supposed to do with her hands. Yuna said, Joon-Hyuk. I'm asking the room, he said. Not sharply, just definitively, like closing a door. The cousin with the expensive haircut, his name was Min Jae. Imani had heard it said across the kitchen counter enough times to know it looked up from his plate and said, the chef. The chef, Joon-Hyuk repeated. And her name? Min Jae's mouth opened, closed. He glanced at the woman beside him, who looked at her own hands. Brooks, Joon-Hyuk said. Imani Brooks. She has worked in this kitchen for 22 months. He looked around the table. How many of you know that? No one answered. How many of you have ever said her name? The silence had a texture now. It was the silence of people who were realizing, too late, that they had misread a situation they thought they had total control of. Yuna set her champagne flute down. She did it carefully, the way you handle something you might want to throw. You've been standing up there for a while, she said. Her voice was measured. How much did you see? Enough, Joon-Hyuk said. Then you saw that I saw what you did with the gloves. Yuna blinked. Just once. A very small recalibration. Hygiene is... Don't, he said, one word. The room contracted around it. Yuna looked at him for a long moment. Then she looked at Imani. And the look she gave Imani was the kind you give a problem that has made itself known at an inconvenient time. Not fear. Not guilt. Calculation. She was deciding something. Imani met her eyes. She did not look away. This was the thing about being the person in the room that everyone had spent the evening deciding didn't matter. You had nothing left to lose by looking directly at what was in front of you. Yuna looked away first. It was small, it was quick, but it happened, and Imani felt it register somewhere in her body the way a temperature drop registers, not dramatic, just real, just a shift in conditions. Joon-Hyuk pushed his chair back and stood. He walked to where Imani was standing. He stopped about 3 feet from her, close enough to be a deliberate act, far enough to be respectful, and he looked at her with the same still expression he'd worn since he walked into the room. Are you all right? He said. Imani's jaw tightened. She had not been asked that question tonight. Not by anyone. The directness of it, the plainness of it, did something she hadn't expected. It hit a place in her chest that had been braced so long. It had forgotten bracing, wasn't the same as being fine. I'm working, she said. That's not what I asked. She looked at him. I heard what you asked. He nodded. He understood, she thought, that she wasn't going to answer it. Not here. Not in front of all of them. Because answering it honestly would have meant letting the room see something she had refused to let them see all evening, and she had been holding that particular door shut since the moment the gloves went on. Okay, he said. He turned back to the table. I want the phones on the table, he said. Every one of them. Face up. Murmuring. Shifting. The ant with the straight spine said, Joon-Hyuk, this is quiet. Now, he said. It was a word he said the way you turn a key. It fit the lock of the room, and everything stopped. Phones appeared on the table. 8 of them. 9. 11. He looked at them. Anyone who took photographs tonight is going to delete them. Every single one. You're going to do it while I watch. He paused. And then I'm going to have my security team's tech manager verify that they're gone from the cloud. You can start. You cannot be serious, said the woman who had fetched the gloves for Yuna. Her name was Hyun, a university friend of Yuna's who had been at the estate before for a bridal fitting event. Her voice had the pitch of someone accustomed to incredulity as a social strategy. This is a private dinner, not. You're in my house, Joon-Hyuk said. Delete the photos. Haein looked at Yuna. Yuna was looking at Joon-Hyuk. Yuna said, You're embarrassing our guests. Someone was humiliated in my house tonight, he said, in front of guests, by my fiancé. He let that word sit without any weight on it, which somehow made it heavier. Embarrassment is already in the room. I'm just deciding whose. Min Jae reached for his phone first. The sound of it fingers on a screen, the specific sequence of actions that meant deleting, broke something open in the room. Once one person moved, others followed. Not quickly, not graciously. The way people comply when the alternative is too visible to risk. Joon-Hyuk watched each of them. Imani watched Joon-Hyuk. She was trying to locate what she felt about this, and was having trouble. There was something that was close to relief, but wasn't quite it. Relief implies that the danger is over, and she was not naive enough to believe the danger was over. There was something else, a complicated awareness that she was being defended by a man who had employed her for almost 2 years and had never said her full name to her face, and that this defense, as real as it was, came with its own questions attached to it. Why now? What it meant? What it would cost her to accept it, or appear to accept it? She was a woman who had learned to be precise about the difference between someone helping her and someone managing a situation that had become inconvenient for them. She wasn't sure yet which this was. She was watching to find out. The phones were cleared, one by one. Joon-Hyuk did not check each one individually. He didn't need to. She understood. The gesture itself had done something. It had taken the weapons out of the room. Whatever had been captured tonight, the easy circulation of it, had been interrupted. He walked back to the head of the table. He did not sit. Min-jae, he said. The cousin looked up. He had the particular expression of a man who has spent most of his life skating just inside the edge of accountability and is now sensing, for the first time, that the edge has moved. Your position at CO Pacific ends at the end of the month, Joon-Hyuk said. Min-jae's face went still. What? You heard me. 'Cause of tonight? This is... Min-jae looked around the table for support and found none. I said 3 sentences to the woman. I was making conversation. You told her she should be grateful that people like us allow her into a house like this. Joon-Hyuk's voice did not change. That's not conversation. That's something else. And I've been hearing about the something else for months. He pulled out his chair again and sat. We'll talk about the transition timeline on Monday. Min-jae pushed back from the table. He stood. He was breathing fast, and his face had gone a color that didn't suit him. You're doing this because of a chef, he said. The word chef was not used neutrally. I'm doing this because you've been using my name to treat people badly for 3 years, Joon-Hyuk said. Tonight just made it visible. Min-jae stood at the table for 4 more seconds. Then he walked out of the dining room without saying another word, and the sound of his footsteps crossing the marble foyer echoed back to them like punctuation. The aunt, the straight spine, her name was Soo-jin. Imani had heard her addressed that way enough times, folded her hands on the table with tremendous control. This is a family matter, she said to Joon-Hyuk. Her tone was the kind that assumes authority by habit. This is not the time or the place for. You sent a plate back tonight because she touched the rim, Joon-Hyuk said. She didn't touch the rim. I know because I watched. And I know because this is the 4th time in 2 months that a complaint has been filed against Miss Brooks from inside this family. 4 complaints. All of them reviewed by Mrs. Cho. None of them substantiated. He looked at his aunt. All of them filed from the same 2 sources. The aunt's chin went up by a fraction. The penthouse on Wilshire, Joon-Hyuk said. You've been in it for 6 years. Rent-free. He picked up his water glass. That arrangement ends at the end of the year. Mrs. Cho will send you the relevant paperwork. Soo-jin's composure held. It held impressively, actually, the kind of composure that comes from decades, of refusing to let younger people see your reaction. But her hands, which she had folded on the table, pressed against each other just slightly harder. Just enough to show. You would do that to, she said. For this? I would do that for what this represents, he said. And yes, the room had gone so quiet that Imani could hear faintly the sound of the kitchen ventilation system running through the wall behind her. A sound she'd heard every working day for 22 months. Familiar. Grounding. She held on to it. Yuna had been watching all of this without speaking. She had been sitting with her hands in her lap and her spine very straight and her expression doing something complex, cycling through calculations too fast to read cleanly. She was smart, Imani understood. Whatever Imani felt about her, she was genuinely smart. She was assessing. She was deciding where the walls were before she committed to which way she was going to move. You should have told me you had concerns, Yuna said to Joon-Hyuk. Her voice was different now, not the light, pleasant tone she'd used with the room all evening. Quieter, more direct. The voice you uses when the audience shrinks to 1. If you had problems with how the household was being managed when I was present, we could have discussed it. I did have concerns, he said. I raised them with my estate manager. I asked Mrs. Cho to document incidents. Something moved across Yuna's face. Very fast. You were documenting. I was being careful. Since when? Since the third complaint against me. Brooks that didn't check out. Yuna looked at the table surface for 3 seconds. In those 3 seconds, Imani watched something shift in her not guilt. She didn't think it was guilt, but a recalibration. The discovery that the room she thought she understood had a different floor plan than the one she'd been moving through. You built a case, Yuna said. I paid attention, Joon-Hyuk said. That's all. While we were engaged. While I was responsible for people who work under my roof? Yes. Yuna's eyes moved to Imani. They stayed there. And Imani did not look away, because she was done looking away tonight. She had decided that somewhere between the gloves and the apron, and this man saying her name out loud, in a room full of people who'd never bothered to learn it. You think she didn't know what she was doing? Yuna said. Her voice had shifted again, something sharper underneath it now. Something she'd been keeping below the surface. Standing in this house, looking the way she looks, being noticed by you. Imani said, before she could stop herself. I cooked your food. Yuna turned to her fully. Don't, Yuna said. I cooked your food, Imani said again. Steady. Level. Tonight and every other night your name was in this house. I don't know what story you've built about me. But I showed up here, and I did my job, and I never— You knew exactly what you were doing, Yuna said. Her voice had gone cold now. The pleasant surface entirely gone. Underneath it was something rawer, and Imani thought something actually hurt, which was its own complicated thing to look at. Don't stand there looking innocent. You're not invisible. You made sure of that, Yuna. Joon-Hyuk's voice was a wall. She positioned herself. Stop. I've seen how she— Stop talking. Yuna stopped. The room was very still. Joon-Hyuk looked at his fiancée for a long time. Long enough that the silence stopped being uncomfortable and became something else, the kind of quiet that arrives when two people who have been saying something indirectly for months finally run out of indirection. I need you to understand something, he said. What happened tonight? The gloves, the apron. What your friend said. What my family said. That didn't happen because of Imani. It happened because you walked into this kitchen and decided a woman who's built something real here was a prop for your evening. He paused. And I need you to understand that I'm not saying this because of who she is to me. I'm saying it because of who you became when you thought no one important was watching. Yuna's mouth opened. Then it closed. She picked up her champagne glass. She set it down without drinking. She looked at the table. Then she said very quietly, So what are you telling me? I'm telling you that tonight changed things. What things? He didn't answer immediately. He looked at his engagement ring. The way a person looks at something they have been wearing long enough to stop noticing it, and are now noticing again. And Imani understood, in the specific way that women who have spent years reading rooms understand things, that the next few minutes were going to alter the landscape of this house, in ways that would take a long time to fully measure. Joon-Hyuk, Yuna said. Her voice was very controlled now. Every molecule of it, we have 400 guests. He looked up from the ring. 400 guests and 2 families who have been building toward this for 3 years, and a deposit on the venue that you cannot— I know what we have, he said. Then you know what walking back from this means. I know what all of it means, he said. Yuna leaned forward, just slightly. This woman is an employee. She is someone you pay. She has nothing to do with her. It has everything. It has to do with who you are, he said. When you pressed those gloves onto her hands in front of 40 people, you were telling me something about who you are. Not about her, about you. His voice did not rise. It didn't need to. And the problem isn't that I don't want to believe it. The problem is that I do. Yuna sat back. Imani was no longer counting her breaths. She had stopped at some point in the last several minutes, without noticing. Her body had moved past the place where counting helped, and into a territory that was rawer and more awake. She felt exposed, standing at the edge of a conflict that had her name threaded through it but wasn't entirely hers. She was the catalyst. The incident. The woman the room kept returning to the way a wound keeps returning to your attention. She was not a prize. She was not a damsel. She was a woman with $47,000 saved and $33,000 to go, and a mother who needed her to keep this job, And she was watching a man she didn't really know dismantle engagement in real time, partly on her behalf, and she had not asked him to do it, and she did not know how to hold that. She had never wanted to be the reason for anything in this house. She had just wanted to cook. The dining room doors opened. Mrs. Cho stepped in. She stood at the threshold with a small, sealed folder in her hands, the kind used for internal documents, for things you'd rather have on paper than on a screen, and she looked at Joon-Hyuk with the expression of a person who has been waiting for permission to deliver something for longer than was comfortable. "You asked me to bring this when you were ready, Mrs. Cho said. Joon-Hyuk said, "Set it on the table." She did. She left without looking at anyone else. Yoona looked at the folder. "What is that?" she said. "Documentation," Joon-Hyuk said. "The complaints filed against Ms. Brooks. The staff reports from the past 18 months. Security footage requests. Notes from Mrs. Cho after each incident." He left it on the table, unopened. "I've reviewed all of it. I wanted it here in the room tonight in case anyone needed to understand that what I know is not based on what I saw from the balcony. What I know goes back a long time." The room absorbed this. The aunt had not moved. The friends who remained at the table had not moved. Yoona had not moved, but the stillness had a different quality than the stillness of 10 minutes ago. This was the stillness of people who understand that the ground has changed, but can't yet see where the edges of the new landscape are. Yoona reached out and touched the folder. One finger. The way you touch something to test whether it's hot. "You investigated me," she said. "I investigated my household," he said. "You happened to be part of what I found. While we were engaged," she said again. While my kitchen staff was being systematically made miserable," he said. "Yes." Yoona pulled her hand back from the folder. She was quiet for a long time. Long enough that the room began to shift again, that slow, tidal quality of a space in which something has been decided but not yet said. Then Yoona looked at Imani, and the look was nothing like the looks she'd given her all evening. Not contempt, not casual cruelty, not the performance of disgust for an audience. This look was direct, personal, stripped of the social geometry that had governed the rest of the night. "You think he's doing this for you," Yoona said. Imani said nothing. "You think this is about you being wronged, about fairness, about someone finally seeing you." She paused. "But you're standing in a room full of consequences that are going to outlast tonight, and none of them were yours to start, and none of them will be yours to finish." She leaned back in her chair. "And when this room empties, and the family manages itself, and the folders get filed, and everyone moves on, you'll still be the chef. And he'll still be who he is. And you'll cook for the next gathering, and the one after that, and you'll be exactly where you were before tonight. Except now they'll all know your name. And knowing your name is not the same as respecting you." The room waited. Imani looked at Yoona for a long time. Then she said, "You pressed gloves onto my hands in front of 40 people. Yoona blinked. "You brought out a maid's apron and held it against my body while your friends took photographs," Masae said. "I hadn't done anything to you. I hadn't spoken to you. I had cooked your food, and you did that." She paused. "I hear everything you're saying about what happens after tonight, and you might be right about some of it. But none of it changes what you did, and none of it is why I'm still standing in this room." "Why are you still standing in this room?" Yoona said. Imani thought about it honestly. "Because I haven't decided to leave yet," she said. It was the truest thing she'd said all evening. Joon-Hyuk looked at her. Then he looked at the ring on his finger. He reached up, took it off, set it beside Yoona's untouched dinner plate with the specific quietness of a man who had decided something a long time ago and is only now completing the action. "The wedding is cancelled," he said. Yoona did not freeze the way people freeze in films dramatically, suddenly, all at once. She stilled. The way water stills when the thing that was moving through it stops. Everything in her went careful and precise and very, very controlled. "Say that again," she said. "The wedding is cancelled. You're ending a 3-year engagement," she said, "in front of your family because of one dinner. I'm ending it because of who I watched you be for 20 minutes when you thought I wasn't in the building," he said. "The dinner is just when I finally saw it clearly." Yoona's eyes went to Imani one more time. And Imani saw it, the thing underneath all of it, under the cruelty and the calculation and the controlled recovery and the sharp targeted words. She saw something that looked very much like a woman who had built something over 3 years and was watching it come apart and couldn't locate the exact moment it had started to go wrong, which is its own particular kind of grief, even when the thing you've built wasn't good. She didn't feel sorry for Yuna, but she saw her. That was different. Yuna stood up. She did it slowly and with total control. She did not touch the ring. She picked up her clutch from the table. She looked around the room at the people in it, the family who hadn't defended her, the friends who were now looking at anything that wasn't her face, and her expression said very clearly that she was filing all of it and that the filing was not finished. She looked at Joon-Hyuk last. "You don't know what you've done tonight," she said. "I think I do," he said. She walked to the dining room doors. She opened them herself. She left. The sound of her heels on the marble foyer was precise and evenly spaced, and didn't change pace once. And the dining room, which had been so loud and warm and golden 2 hours ago, sat in the aftermath of itself, looking at the ring beside the untouched plate, looking at the folder on the table, looking at the space where Yuna had been, looking at Imani, who was still standing exactly where she had been standing for the last 45 minutes, holding nothing, having given nothing back that they hadn't already taken from her. Joon-Hyuk looked at her, and for the first time that evening, she didn't know what expression to put on her face, because the room was finally fully looking at her, and she had not prepared for that. The room didn't empty all at once. That was the thing about a space after something irreversible happens. People don't file out cleanly. They drift. They find reasons to stand at the edge of things. They talk to each other in the low, careful voices of people who are still deciding what version of tonight they'll carry forward when they leave. Joon-Hyuk's aunt Soo-jin, the one with the straight spine and the penthouse she would no longer have by year's end, was the first to stand. She did it without making eye contact with anyone, gathered her bag, and walked to the door with the particular dignity of a woman who has decided that leaving quickly is the same as leaving on her own terms. It wasn't. But the decision to believe it was the only leverage she had left, and she took it. The friends who had come with Yuna followed in a cluster. They left the way people leave when they've witnessed something they didn't sign up for, and are slightly afraid of being associated with the wreckage. Fast, quiet eyes forward. The family members, who remained 3 cousins Imani, recognized from previous events, old couple she knew only as relatives from the Busan side of the family, moved to the far end of the table and spoke in Korean, in the careful, compressed way people speak when they want to be heard by each other and no one else. Imani had not moved. She was aware of this. She was aware of herself standing in the same spot she'd occupied for the last 45 minutes, the kitchen behind her wall, the room in front of her, the evening sitting inside her chest, like something swallowed wrong. She should go back to the kitchen. She knew that. The professional thing, the instinctual thing, was to return to the space that was hers and begin the process of breaking down the service, the plates, the remaining food, the equipment that needed to be stored and cleaned and put back in its correct order. She didn't move. Joon-Hyuk was still at the head of the table. He hadn't touched his food. He was looking at the ring sitting beside the plate, not with sentiment, she thought. Not with regret, exactly. With the expression of a man accounting for a decision he'd already made, and was now measuring the actual weight of. He looked up and found her standing there. He said, "You don't have to stay in the room." "I know," she said. He waited. "I'm deciding," she said. He nodded. He understood that, she thought. The deliberateness of it. The refusal to be moved before you were ready to move. Mrs. Cho appeared at the kitchen doorway. She'd been managing the back of the house, keeping the remaining staff away from the dining room, running a quiet interference that Imani had registered and been grateful for without being able to say so. She looked at Imani. Her expression asked a question. Imani shook her head slightly. "Not yet." Mrs. Cho withdrew. The remaining family members finished their conversation and left in pairs. The way people do when the event is clearly over, but no one has officially called it. They nodded to Joon-Hyuk as they passed. He acknowledged each of them with the minimal gesture of a man whose attention is organized elsewhere. Then the room was empty except for the 2 of them and the debris of the evening, the half-empty glasses, the plates with their carefully constructed food, sitting mostly uneaten, the folder still on the table, the ring. Imani walked to the table. She sat down, not in the seat beside him, not across from him. several seats down, where she had a clear line to the door and a clear line to him. She sat because her feet had been carrying her since 5:30 in the morning, and the weight of the last distance hour had settled in her lower back like something physical. She put her hands on the table, still wearing the gloves. She looked at them for a second, then pulled them off, one finger at a time, and set them on the table in front of her. Joon-Hyuk watched her do it. "I owe you an apology," he said. "You don't know me well enough to owe me anything," Imani said. "I know you well enough to know that what happened tonight in my house was my responsibility," he said. "The people who did it are my family, my fiancés. The house is mine. That makes it mine." Imani looked at him. "Okay," she said. "That's all? I'm not going to tell you you're wrong," she said. "But an apology from you right now, I don't know what to do with it. It's too close to everything else. It doesn't have its own shape yet." He was quiet. "That's fair," he said. She looked at the gloves on the table. The latex kind, thin and disposable. The kind you could get in bulk from any restaurant supply store. The kind that meant nothing in a kitchen context and had meant everything in the context of the last 2 hours. "The complaints," she said. "The ones in the folder." "Yes." "How many of them went anywhere?" She stopped. "Did Mrs. Cho come to you? Or did you go to her?" "She came to me," he said, "after the second one." She was concerned. She said the complaints didn't match what she was observing. "And you believed her?" "I asked her to start documenting." "Yes." "Imani processed this, so you knew. For months. I suspected. There's a difference." "Not from where I was standing," she said. Not angrily. Just accurately. "From where I was standing, I was filing away incidents and wondering if I was going to come in one day and find out the complaints had added up to something they could use. I was wondering if I was going to lose the job." She paused. "I have reasons this job matters that have nothing to do with this house." "I know about your mother," he said. She looked at him sharply. "Mrs. Cho mentioned it," he said. "Not as gossip. She mentioned it in the context of explaining why she believed you were not a flight risk when the complaint started. That you had reasons to stay that made no sense if you were the problem." Imani sat with that for a moment. The privacy of it, the fact of it being known, the way information moves through a household like water through stone, slowly, inevitably. "And the restaurant?" she said. "She mentioned that too." Imani nodded. There was a silence between them that had a different quality than the silences of the last hour. Less charged, more tired. The kind of silence that's left when people have silence performing for a room and are just two people with the facts of a situation between them. Then Imani's phone buzzed. She almost didn't look at it. It was in the front pocket of her chef's jacket, and she had a policy. During service, she didn't check her phone during service, not unless the contact was Deja or her mother's care coordinator. It was a rule she'd set years ago because a distracted kitchen was a dangerous kitchen, and she'd enforced it on herself more strictly than on anyone else. But service was over. She looked. It was a text from a number she didn't recognize. No name. Just a number and a message. "Check your email. You need to see it before he does something you can't take back." She read it twice. She looked at Joon-Hyuk, who was looking at the folder on the table, and hadn't noticed her phone. She opened her email. There were two mentioned address. She didn't recognize numbers and numbers letters. The kind of address that was created to be used once and mean nothing. The first had no subject line. The second was titled simply, "Your Kitchen." "Your reputation." Read both. She opened the first one. It took her about 8 seconds to understand what she was reading. Then it took her another 10 to accept that she had understood correctly. The email contained screenshots, 12 of them. They were messages, text messages, and emails exchanged between two parties. One of the parties was a name she didn't recognize. The other was a name she recognized immediately, because it was hers. Except it wasn't her. The messages were fabricated. She could see that they were fabricated. The phrasing was wrong. The timestamps had irregularities she could spot because she knew her own communication patterns, but they had been constructed carefully enough to be convincing at a glance. In the screenshots, Imani Brooks was asking someone outside the estate for information about the Sesio family's private event calendar, guest lists, security rotations, the kind of information that, in the context of who the Sesio family was and what business they were involved in, would read as something extremely specific, extremely dangerous. Not theft, not misconduct, Something that looked like intelligence gathering. Something that, if it landed in the wrong hands with the right framing, would make us from so fast. She wouldn't have time to say the word fabricated. She opened the second email. It was shorter. 4 lines. These have already been sent to 2 members of the CO family board. If Joon-Hyuk cancels this wedding, they will be forwarded to 3 additional parties by morning. Your name will be the story, not hers. Yours. Walk away from tonight quietly and this goes away. Stay in that room and it doesn't. Imani read it twice. Then she put her phone face down on the table. Her hands were steady. She noted this with some distant part of herself, the part that monitored her body's behavior, the way a pilot monitors instrument panels. Hands steady, breathing elevated, heart rate significant. The back of her neck was cold. She picked up the phone again. She read the second email one more time. She looked at Joon-Hyuk. He was watching her now. He'd noticed the shift in the room or in her, more precisely. The quality of her stillness had changed from tired to something else. What is it? He said. Someone just sent me something, she said. I need to know the complaints that were filed against me. The fabricated ones. Did they ever include anything about security? About your family's information? Joon-Hyuk's expression didn't change, but something behind it did, like a light shifting direction. No, he said. Why? She turned the phone around and slid it across the table to him. He looked at the screen. He read. His face was very still in the way that faces are still when the person wearing them is doing rapid, invisible work behind the eyes. He picked up the phone, scrolled, read the second email, set the phone down. He was quiet for 11 seconds. She counted them. These were sent to you tonight, he said. Just now. Whoever sent them waited to see what happened in this room, and then sent them when it became clear the wedding wasn't happening. That's what it looks like. He picked up the phone again, looked at the number that had texted her first. Put the phone down. The screenshots are fabricated, she said. I need you to know that. I've never contacted anyone outside this house about your family. I know, he said. You can't just know, she said. You need to actually look at them. The timestamps are Ms. Brooks. His voice was quiet. I know. She stopped. He looked at her with the kind of steadiness that is either deeply trustworthy or very well practiced, and she had no way yet to tell which. This isn't the first version of something like this I've seen, he said, and the address that sent it, that format, I've seen it used before. He paused. This came from inside the family. Imani looked at him. Yuna left 20 minutes ago, she said. She had help, he said. She's been here for 8 months. She didn't learn how to do this in 8 months. He stood up. He walked to the folder on the table and opened it. He leafed through the documents inside, not frantically, not quickly, but with the efficiency of a man who has spent time knowing where things are, and he pulled out a single page. He looked at it. His jaw tightened. There's a name in here, he said. Someone's inside my organization who was providing information to the parties who filed the complaints against you. I didn't know what they were building toward. I thought it was about creating grounds for termination, something Yuna could point to when she pushed to replace the kitchen staff. He set the page down. It's larger than that. How much larger? Imani said. Large enough that what's in your email is not really about you, he said. You're the lever. They needed something to threaten me with tonight, something that would make me back down, protect the engagement, not ask the questions I was clearly about to ask. He looked at her. You were the most available leverage. Imani sat with this for a moment. The thing about being used as a lever was that it required being vulnerable, and she had spent years making herself less vulnerable by making herself indispensable, by being so specifically skilled and consistent and professional that there was no clean angle to attack. And they had found one anyway. They had built one from nothing. They had taken her name and her face, and the fact that she worked inside this house and constructed a story that had nothing to do with the truth of who she was. She felt it then. The thing she'd been holding back all evening. Not tears she had made her peace with, not crying in this room a long time ago tonight. Something more internal. A kind of cold, clarifying fury. The type that doesn't make you loud. The type that makes you precise. Who, she said. The name in the folder. He looked at her. I need to handle this carefully, he said. Tell me the name, she said. Ms. Brooks. Someone used my name to build something that could follow me out of this industry, she said. That's not a business problem. That is my life. Tell me. He was quiet for 3 seconds. Park Sung-ho, he said. He manages 3 of the regional accounts for CO Pacific. He's been with the company for 9 years. Is he here tonight? He left earlier. He wasn't on the guest list, he was part of the setup team. She filed the name. She didn't have a face to attach it to, but names were enough. Names were where you started. He built the screenshots, she said. I believe so. The technical construction, I need to have it verified. But the access he would have had to certain templates, certain communication formats. He stopped. It's him. And Yuna knew. I think she asked. I don't think she built it herself. He paused. I'm not making a distinction that excuses her. No, Imani said. You're not. She stood up. She needed to be standing. Sitting was the posture of someone waiting for someone else to handle things, and she was done waiting for the evening to resolve itself around her. She paced to the window. The Bel Air hillside was dark below them. Lights scattered across it like something spilled. She looked at it without seeing it. The 2 board members who already received those screenshots, she said. What do they do with them? Nothing, if I move first, he said. Which I intend to. And if you don't move fast enough, then it becomes a conversation I have to have with them, directly. About me, she said, about the fabrication. But my name is in it, she said. My name is in a document that went to 2 members of your family's board tonight. Whatever you do next, whatever you verify, and explain my name has been in that room. People don't fully unknow things. They just file them differently. He walked toward her. Not close. He stopped at a distance that was still respectful, still maintaining the specific geometry that had existed between them all evening. But he was looking at her directly. You're right, he said. She turned to look at him. I don't have a version of this that gives you your name back clean, he said. I can eliminate the threat. I can expose the fabrication. I can make clear to everyone with access to those screenshots exactly what they are and where they came from and what it costs the person who built them. But I cannot put your name back the way it was before to tonight. He paused. And I'm not going to stand here and tell you I can. Imani looked at him for a long time. Most people would have tried, she said. I know. Most people in your position would have told me it was fine, that it would all be handled, that I shouldn't worry. I know that too. She turned back to the window. She thought about the $47,000. She thought about $33,000 more. She thought about a 22-seat restaurant in Leimert Park, with her name above the door, and her mother at the best table and food that meant something to the people eating it. She thought about the fact that in the span of one evening, her name had been attached to a fabricated document and sent to Fool with the power to make her unhireable. She thought about what it meant to be a black woman in a professional space, when someone with resources decided to use her name as a weapon, how little it took, how permanent the residue. She thought about all of it. Then she said, I want a copy of everything in that folder. Joon-Hyuk looked at her. Every complaint, every staff report, every document your estate manager collected. The emails that were sent to me tonight, the screenshots, all of it. She turned around. If I'm going to protect myself, I need to understand exactly what was built against me and exactly what the truth looks like beside it. I'm not leaving that to anyone else. That information contains sensitive. Mr. CO. Her voice was level. My name is in documents sitting in front of 2 people I've never met. Whatever sensitive material is in that folder is my business now, because my life is in it. He looked at her. Then he nodded. I'll have Mrs. Cho make copies tonight, he said. You'll have everything before you leave. She breathed. Not relief. The breathing of someone who has just identified the first foothold in a wall they're going to have to climb. Then Mrs. Cho came through the kitchen, and the look on her face was different from any expression she'd worn all evening. It was the look of someone who has received information and is carrying it carefully because it's delicate. Mr. CO, she said. I'm sorry to interrupt. What is it? Mrs. Cho glanced at Imani, not as a suggestion that she leave, as an acknowledgement that what she was about to say concerned her. I've just been informed, Mrs. Cho said, that a post appeared approximately 30 minutes ago on a private industry forum, the one used by high-end residential staffing agencies in Los Angeles. She paused. It's attributed to a source connected to the Seo household. It states that a kitchen employee was dismissed tonight for conduct related to a breach of household privacy. Imani felt the floor change under her feet. Not literally. but the sensation was close enough to physical that she put one hand on the back of the nearest chair. No dismissal has been issued, Joon-Hyuk said. I know, Mrs. Cho said, but the post is already circulating. 3 agencies have seen it. One of them has flagged the employee name in their record system as pending investigation. The employee name. Imani's name. She stood very still with her hand on the back of the chair, and she understood, with total clarity, what had just happened. The email to her phone had been the warning, the visible threat, the one designed to be shown to her so she'd have a choice. But the real move had already been made. It had been made while she was still standing in the dining room, with an apron pressed against her body. The post had gone up 30 minutes ago, before the ring came off the table, before the wedding was canceled, before any of tonight's visible reckoning happened. They hadn't been threatening her. They had already done it. The threat was just to keep her quiet about the rest of it. She took her hand off the chair. She's picked up her phone from the table. She looked at the texts, the emails, the unknown number, and she saw it differently now. Not a warning to act, a notification that it was done. How many agencies? She said. 3 that Mrs. Cho knows of, Joon-Hyuk said. His voice had gone very flat in a way she hadn't heard before. The staffing industry in Los Angeles is small, she said. Residential, high-end, it's a specific network. If a flag goes into 3 agencies' systems tonight, it moves. She put the phone down. By morning, every household that would hire a private chef at this level will have seen something with my name on it. She said it without inflection. She needed to hear the facts in her own voice before she could decide what to do with them. I'm going to have it taken down, Joon-Hyuk said. You can take down the post, she said. You can't take down what 3 agencies' records coordinators have already read and stored. She looked at him. This is my career. This is the industry I work in. A flag in 3 staffing systems in Los Angeles is not something you remove with a phone call. Then I'll make more than one call, he said. You don't understand how this works, she said. Not unkindly, not even with frustration. With the calm of someone explaining the inside of a room to someone who's never been in it. You have power in rooms I will never have access to. But this particular room, the staffing network, the private household industry, the way that reputation travels between agencies and households and references you calling on my behalf will not fix this. It might make it worse. Because then I'm the chef whose employer had to intervene. That's its own story. Joon-Hyuk was very still. Then what do you need, he said. She looked at him. She thought about $47,000. She thought about $33,000 more. She thought about her mother in a dialysis chair and a restaurant with 22 seats and her name above a door that nobody else had a key to. She thought about the fact that someone had looked at her body, her race, her job, her relative powerlessness in this house, and decided she was the perfect lever. Not because of anything she'd done, because of what she represented. Because of what they thought she could be made to bear. She thought about all of it. And then she made a decision that she understood, even as she was making it, would require her to become someone slightly different from the woman she'd been walking into this house 14 hours ago. Not worse, not harder in the wrong ways, but done being careful in ways that only protected other people's comfort. I need everything in that folder, she said, tonight, and I need the name of whoever runs the staffing forum where the post went up. She paused. And I need to know the documentation you have, the security footage, the staff reports, the evidence of the fabrication. Is it enough? If I needed to take this outside this house, outside your control, to protect my own name is what you have enough to stand on. Joon-Hyuk held her gaze. Yes, he said. Then I need to borrow it, she said. Not for you. For me. He was quiet for a long moment. Outside, somewhere below the hillside, the city moved through its Thursday evening without knowing any of this had happened. Traffic and restaurant noise and the specific ambiance of Los Angeles after dark, that particular combination of aspiration and indifference that the city wore every night, regardless of what happened inside its houses. Imani stood in the dining room of a house she had worked in for 22 months, with her name in 3 agency systems under a flag she hadn't earned, and she understood that the path she had been walking careful, disciplined, saving every dollar, surviving every indignity, just long enough to get to the other side of it, had just been cut off. The only way forward was not around the damage. It was through it. And going through it, meant she could no longer afford to be the woman who stayed quiet and kept her head down and let the room make its decisions about her without answering back. She would answer back. She would answer back with documentation and witnesses and evidence assembled by a man who had more resources than she'd ever have, and she would use every piece of it to make sure that whatever had been attached to her name tonight did not follow her out of this house and into the life she was still building. She would do it on her own terms. That was the thing she was certain of. Whatever came next, whatever it cost, whatever shape it took, whatever version of herself emerged from the other side of it, it would be on her own terms, or it would not happen at all. She picked up the gloves from the table. She looked at them for 1 second. Then she put them in the trash. Mrs. Cho made the copies herself. She did not delegate it to anyone else in the house, did not send a junior staff member to the office printer, did not hand the folder to anyone. She took it personally to the estate's document room, a small, windowless space off the main corridor that housed the printer, the filing systems, and a shredder that Imani had never paid much attention to before tonight. And she came back 23 minutes later with a sealed envelope and a look on her face that said she understood exactly what she was handing over and had decided, at some point in those 23 minutes, that she was prepared to stand behind it. She gave the envelope to Imani, not to Joon-Hyuk, to Imani. It was a small thing. It was the kind of small thing that mattered more than it should have, because it was a woman making a decision about who the information belonged to. Imani took it, held it, felt the weight of it, paper, documentation, the assembled record of 22 months of incidents that someone had been building toward tonight without her knowing. "Thank you," she said to Mrs. Cho. Mrs. Cho nodded once. Then she said very quietly, "I filed the first report in October. I want you to know that. I didn't wait." "I know," Imani said. "I know you didn't." Mrs. Cho left the room. Joon-Hyuk was on his phone. He'd been on it for the last 10 minutes, standing near the window with his back to the table, speaking in Korean, in the low, efficient cadence of someone issuing instructions rather than having a conversation. She didn't understand all of it. She understood enough. Names, timelines, the word for documentation, which she knew because it sounded close enough to the English. The specific tone people use when they're moving pieces on a board. He ended the call. He turned around. "I have someone pulling the post from the forum," he said. "It should be down within the hour. The 3 agencies I have contact information for the directors of 2 of them. The 3rd is newer. I'm tracking the right person." "How are you framing it?" Imani said. "Falsified information originating from a terminated relationship with my household. Character of the source is well documented. The flag should not stand." "Should not," she said. "Won't," he said. "I'll make sure of it." She believed him, partially. She believed he would do what he said he would do. She was less certain that doing it would be enough, because she had learned, over 31 years, that the distance between the thing was fixed, and the damage was undone, was sometimes so large you couldn't see from one end to the other. "Park Sung-ho," she said. "Where is he tonight? I've sent 2 people to find out. And when they do." Joon-Hyuk looked at her steadily. "He'll be dealt with." She didn't ask what that meant. She understood, in the general sense, what dealt with meant in the context of this household and this family, and she understood that her feelings about that were complicated, and would remain complicated, and this was not the night to untangle them. "I need to make a call," she said. "I need 5 minutes." He nodded. He walked toward the dining room entrance, giving her the room without being asked to leave it. She called Dija. It rang 3 times. Then, "You're calling me at 9:40 on a work night. What happened?" Not a question. Deja had known her for 6 years and had learned to distinguish the categories of Imani's calls by the time of night and the fact that they happened at all. "I need you to listen to me for about 4 minutes and not say anything until I'm done," Imani said. "Okay," she told her. Not everything, not the specific details that were Joon-Hyuk's to manage, not the names of the family members involved, the shape of it, the gloves, the apron, the engagement being canceled, the fabricated screenshots, the flag in the staffing system. She told it in the flat, organized way she used when she needed to hear something out loud to understand it herself. Dija was quiet for all of it. When Imani finished, Dija said, "Are you still in the house?" "Yes." "Are you safe?" "Yes." "Okay." A pause. "Do you need me to come get you?" "No." "Do you need me to come get you?" And you're saying no, Because you're still in professional mode and haven't caught up to the part where you're allowed to need something. Imani's jaw tightened. She pressed her lips together for a second. Maybe. I'm coming, Deja said. Don't, I'll be home in 2 hours. I just needed to hear your voice. A silence. Then Imani. You okay? Not really, she said. But I know what I'm doing. That's different from okay. Yeah, she said. I know. She hung up. She stood in the empty dining room for 30 seconds. Just stood. Let herself exist in the room without performing anything for anyone. Felt the tiredness in her legs, the tightness across her shoulders, the specific ache behind her eyes that came from 14 hours on her feet, followed by the kind of emotional expenditure that doesn't show up until your body decides it's safe to charge you for it. Then she picked up the envelope and walked out of the dining room. Joon-Hyuk was in the corridor. He'd been standing there, not pacing, just waiting. He looked at her when she appeared. I need to go to the kitchen, she said. I need to break down the service. The staff can. It's my kitchen, she said. I break it down. He didn't argue. She went to the kitchen and she worked. She worked with the methodical, full-body focus that kitchens required and that she had always found clarifying in the way that other people found running or music, clarifying the specific relief of a task that demanded all of you and gave you somewhere to put the parts of yourself that didn't have anywhere else to go. She broke down the stations. She wrapped and stored what was salvageable. She dealt with what wasn't. She ran the first round of dishes. She did it all with the quiet, exact efficiency of someone who had done it thousands of times and knew the sequence in her sleep. Miguel, the pastry chef, appeared at the kitchen door 40 minutes in. He was still in his uniform. He'd clearly been in the building this whole time waiting. She understood the way the good ones waited. He looked at her with an expression that had nothing performative in it, just concern, the real kind. You need help? He said. I'm almost done. He walked in anyway. He picked up a clean towel and started drying the rack of wine glasses that had come out of the dishwasher without her asking him to. They worked in silence for several minutes. Then Miguel said, without looking up from the glasses, I told them. Imani stopped. In October, he said. When the first complaint came in, the one about the contamination allegation that wasn't real, I went to Mrs. Cho and I told her I'd been in the kitchen all day and there was no contamination. That I'd seen the whole prep and there was nothing. He set a glass down. She said she'd handle it. I don't know what she did with it, but I told her. Imani looked at him. He was 26 years old from Boyle Heights, and he made pastry with the kind of quiet intensity that reminded her of the version of herself at that age, serious, in a way that other people sometimes mistook for arrogance. Why didn't you tell me? She said. Because you were already carrying it, he said, and I didn't want to add to it if Mrs. Cho was handling it. And then he paused. And then tonight happened, and I wasn't in the room, but I heard some of it from the corridor, and I should have been in that room. It wasn't your fight, she said. It was, he said. That's the thing. It was my kitchen, too. She looked at him for a long moment. You kept your job, she said. That matters. My job doesn't matter if the kitchen isn't the kitchen anymore, he said. She turned back to the counter. She worked for another minute. Then she said, Joon-Hyuk knows about the complaint you filed. He's reinstating you if any action was taken. Miguel was quiet. No action was taken, he said. I've still got my job. Good, she said. Keep it. At 11:47, the kitchen was clean. Imani stood in it for a moment. Just stood. The ventilation system ran its low, familiar sound. The surfaces gleamed under the kitchen lighting, the way they always gleamed when she'd finished a breakdown, that particular clean that came from her specific standard, the one she'd set for herself years ago and never lowered. She had cooked in this kitchen for 22 months. She didn't know, standing there, whether she would cook in it again. That thought arrived without drama, just landed. She let it. Then she picked up the envelope and walked out. Joon-Hyuk was in the main sitting room, adjacent to the foyer. He was on another call. He ended it when she appeared. The post is down, he said. All of it? Every version that was live. My tech team is monitoring for reposts. He paused. I reached the director of the first agency. She's removing the flag tonight. The second agency, I'll have a conversation tomorrow morning. He looked at her. The third is the one I'm still tracking. Name of the agency? Meridian Residential. Newer operation, been running about 18 months. Director is someone named Calloway. She filed it. She would find Calloway herself if she needed to. Park Sung-ho, she said. Did your people locate him? Something moved across Joon-Hyuk's face. Yes. He's at a hotel in Koreatown. He checked in 2 hours ago. He paused. He wasn't planning to be home tonight. She understood what that meant. He had known what was going to happen. He had positioned himself to be absent from whatever came after. I need to speak to him, she said. No, Joon-Hyuk said. Mr. Seo, I need you to trust me on this one thing, he said. Speaking to him directly, it gives him information about what you know and how you know it. It hands him time to construct something. Let me handle Park. He looked at her. I will handle Park. And when I'm done, there will be nothing left of what he built that can touch you. She looked at him. She wanted to say, I don't know you well enough to hand that to you. She wanted to say, every time in my life, I've let someone else handle the thing that was hurting me. They've handled it in a way that was convenient for them and adequate for me. She wanted to say, I didn't survive tonight by trusting the room. She said, if your handling of Park Sung-ho leaves anything standing that has my name on it, anything, I will handle the rest myself, on my own terms, with what's in this envelope. I understand, he said. I need you to mean that. I mean it. She held his gaze for 3 seconds. Then she nodded. She picked up her bag from the chair where she'd left it before service began, 14 hours and an entire lifetime ago. She was almost at the foyer when his voice came after her. Ms. Brooks. She stopped, did not turn around immediately. Then she did. He was standing in the sitting room doorway. In the low light of the corridor, he looked tired. In a way she hadn't seen earlier, the specific tiredness of someone who had done something difficult and was now standing in the aftermath of it, still standing, but feeling the weight. The restaurant, he said. The 22 seats. She said nothing. Waited. I'd like to help, he said. Financially. Whatever you need to make it happen, I'd like to be part of. No, she said. He stopped. Thank you, she said. Genuinely. But no. May I ask why? She thought about how to say it honestly. Because if you fund it, it will always have your handwriting on it. Even if nobody else can see it, I'll know it's there. And I've been building toward that restaurant for 12 years, and I need it to be mine. All of mine. The debt and the waiting and the every single dollar I save myself version of mine. She paused. That's not pride. That's just what it has to be. He was quiet for a moment. Okay, he said. She turned to go. For what it's worth, he said, it'll be a good restaurant. She stopped at the door. I know, she said, and she walked out. The night air hit her at the top of the driveway, and she stopped moving for just a moment. Just stood at the edge of the property in her chef's whites, with an envelope under her arm and her bag on her shoulder, and the city spread below her in its Thursday night arrangement and of lights and noise, and the specific difference that Los Angeles maintained toward the events happening inside its houses at any given hour. But she breathed. In. Out, the night air, warm and smelling faintly of jasmine from the estate's landscaping and exhaust from the road below. She walked to her car. She sat in the driver's seat and put the envelope on the passenger seat and sat with her hands on the wheel without starting the engine. She cried for exactly 4 minutes, she counted. Not the held back, controlled kind she'd been managing, inside the real kind. The ugly kind, the kind that comes from a day that was too much, and a body that carried it all the way to the end, and is now informing you of the cost. The kind that her grandmother would have understood, and her mother would have understood, and her mother would have handed her a glass of water over, and Deja would have sat next to without saying anything. 4 minutes. Then she wiped her face with the back of her hand, started the engine, and drove down the hill toward the freeway. She did not know, driving toward Inglewood at 12:16 in the morning, what the next week would look like. She did not know which agencies would be fully cleared by morning and which would take longer. She did not know what Joon-Hyuk's handling of Park Sung-ho's would produce, or what Yuna's exit from the estate would mean for the people left in it, or whether the wedding's cancellation would create a secondary wave of consequences she hadn't thought of yet. She knew the envelope was on the passenger seat. She knew Mrs. Cho had filed the first report in October and had never told her, and she had complicated feelings about that. She knew Miguel had gone to Mrs. Cho about the contamination allegation and had never told her, and she had complicated feelings about that too. She knew that $47,000 was still in her account, and $33,000 was still the distance. She knew her mother's next dialysis appointment was Tuesday. She knew all the things that were actually hers to know, The concrete ones. The ones that didn't depend on what anyone else did or decided or handled on her behalf. She held on to those. She was 3 miles from the freeway on-ramp when her phone rang. Unknown number. She let it ring. She was driving. She didn't answer unknown numbers while driving, especially not at 12:20 in the morning, after the kind of night that left you with a diminished tolerance for surprises. It went to voicemail. She drove. At the on-ramp, she stopped at a red light and looked at her phone. The voicemail icon showed. She put it on speaker and played it. A woman's voice. Controlled. Slightly cold. The voice of someone who was accustomed to speaking last in rooms. Ms. Brooks. My name is Soo-Jin Seo. We've been in the same house for several hours tonight, and we have not spoken directly. I think that needs to be corrected. I have information relevant to your information that is not in the folder my nephew gave you, because it predates the documentation, Mrs. Cho began in October. A pause. I am not calling to apologize. I am calling because what was done tonight using your name exceeded what I agreed to, and I am not prepared to be associated with the version of it that goes any further. If you're willing to meet, I will tell you everything I know. I will tell you when it started, who else is involved, and what the original plan was before tonight. Another pause, shorter. I recognize you have no reason to trust me, but I also think you're smart enough to know that what I'm offering is more useful than what's in that envelope. The light turned green. Imani did not move. The car behind her waited 2 seconds, then honked. She pulled forward, onto the freeway on-ramp, merged into traffic. Her hands were very steady on the wheel. Her heart was doing something complicated in her chest. Soo-Jin Seo, the aunt with the straight spine, the one who was losing the Wilshire penthouse, the one who had sent the plate back, the one who had said you would do that to your family, for this with the specific emphasis that now, hearing the voicemail, sounded less like judgment and more like a woman who understood exactly what the stakes were because she'd been watching them being built. I am not calling to apologize. No, she wasn't. She was calling because the situation had gotten away from her, and she was doing what people like her did when the situation got away from them. She was finding a new position, a new leverage point, a new arrangement that let her step slightly aside from the wreckage while keeping enough in her hands to still matter. Imani understood that completely. She also understood that the woman knew something the folder didn't contain, what the original plan was before tonight, which meant there had been a plan before tonight, which meant what happened in that dining room, the gloves, the apron, the fabricated screenshots, the flag in the staffing system was not improvised, was not a fiancé's cruelty in the heat of a dinner event, was not one bad night accumulating into a bad outcome. It had been designed, and Soo-Jin Seo had been in the room when it was designed. The freeway opened up in front of her. Los Angeles at 12:30 in the morning, sparse traffic, the particular breathing room of a city that runs at 90% capacity all day and expands slightly in the dark. She drove in the middle lane at a steady speed. She did not weave. She did not speed. She drove the way she cooked under pressure, with control, with intention, without wasting anything. She picked up her phone. She dialed the unknown number back. It rang once. Soo-Jin picked up. Ms. Brooks, she said, like she'd been waiting. You said you'd tell me what the original plan was, Imani said. When did it start? A pause. A very small, very controlled intake of breath. 4 months ago, Soo-Jin said, March. There was a meeting. Who was at the meeting? Myself, Park Sung-ho, Yuna's father, via video call from Seoul. Imani's hands tightened on the wheel. And Yuna? She said. Yuna was informed, Soo-Jin said. She didn't run the meeting. She was told what was planned and she agreed. A pause. She was told the goal was to create sufficient grounds to have you removed from the estate before the wedding. Not because of any problem with your work. Because you were... She stopped. Because I was what? Imani said. Soo-Jin was quiet for 3 seconds. Because Joon-Hyuk had mentioned you, she said finally. 3 times in 4 months. In conversation. He mentioned your food. He mentioned something you'd said during an event. He mentioned once that the estate ran differently when you were in it. A pause. In our family, that is not a small thing. In our family, that is the kind of attention that people around a principal learn to manage. Imani drove. The freeway sign above her said 6 miles to her exit. He mentioned my food, she said. He mentioned you, Su-Jin said. 3 times. In a family where he mentions very little. Another pause. Yuna noticed. Her father noticed. I noticed. And we made a decision about how to handle it. A very slight shift in her voice. Tonight was not the decision we made in March. Tonight became something none of us controlled. What Yuna did with the gloves, the apron, that was her own improvisation. It went further than the plan. What was the plan, Imani said. To build a documented case, Su-Jin said. Complaints. Incidents. A pattern that Mrs. Cho would eventually act on. Grounds for termination that looked like a management decision and not a personal one. A pause. Surgical. Clean. You'd lose the job. The agency flags would be the final piece ensuring you didn't resurface in a comparable household where you might intersect with this family again. Imani drove. She drove past a gas station, a sound barrier wall, a cluster of exit signs, another sound barrier wall. They built this over 4 months, she said, to get me out of a house I worked in, because a man mentioned my cooking 3 times. Yes, Su-Jin said. And you're telling me this now because tonight exceeded the plan, and you need to not be holding it when the rest of it comes down. A pause. You're very direct, Su-Jin said. Answer the question. Another pause. Shorter. Yes, Su-Jin said. Imani's exit was 1 mile away. She had been driving steady. She had been keeping her hands level and her speed constant and her breathing deliberate, the way she'd learned to manage herself in the worst moments of a service, the ones where 3 things went wrong at once. And the table was waiting and there was no one else to fix it. But something was happening in her chest that she had been managing all the way through the dinner and the confrontation and the drive and the voicemail and the beginning of this call. And it had been manageable because she'd been moving, making decisions, taking the envelope, planning the next step, and now she was 1 mile from her exit at 12:34 in the morning with a woman on the phone telling her that 4 people had sat in a room in March and decided, in advance, deliberately, with coordination and resources, and a 4-month timeline, to destroy the professional reputation of a chef they'd decided was inconvenient, not because of anything she'd done. Because of what she represented to one man's attention. She took the exit. She parked on the surface street a block from the on-ramp, engine running, and she sat. Ms. Brooks, Su-Jin said. I'm here, Imani said. Will you meet with me? She sat in the car, with the engine running, and the city outside the window, and the envelope on the passenger seat, and the phone in her hand. She thought about the 4 people in a room in March. She thought about 4 months of fabricated complaints, and she thought about Mrs. Cho filing the first report in October, and she thought about Miguel drying glasses tonight without being asked, and she thought about her mother's dialysis chair, and she thought about 22 seats in Limert Park, and she thought about $47,000 and $33,000 more. She thought about all of it, and then something settled in her, not peace, not acceptance, something harder and more specific than either of those. The things that settles when you have been trying to locate the edges of a problem and have finally fully found them. When you know exactly what you are dealing with and how large it is and what it would take to dismantle it. She knew what it would take, and she was going to do it. Yes, she said to Su-Jin Seo. I'll meet with you. When? Imani looked at the clock on the dashboard. Tomorrow morning, she said. 8 o'clock. You pick somewhere public. Public, Su-Jin repeated, slightly surprised. I'm not meeting you in a private space, Imani said, and I'm not coming alone. 8 o'clock. Public location. You send me the address by 7. A pause. All right, Su-Jin said. One more thing, Imani said yes. The names of everyone at that March meeting. All of them, including whoever dialed in from Seoul. I need them in a text before I go to sleep tonight. A long silence. That Su-Jin began. That's the price of the meeting, Imani said. You decide. She held the phone and waited. Outside, a car passed. Then, another. The city moving through itself the way it always moved, unaware, constant, entirely indifferent to the fact that a woman was sitting parked on a side street, deciding the shape of what came next. Su-Jin said, very carefully, I'll send them. Good, Imani said. She ended the call. She sat for 1 more minute. Just 1. Let herself have that minute. Felt the seat under her, the steering wheel under her hands, the familiar weight of the envelope on the passenger seat. Then she picked up her phone and called Joon-Hyuk. He answered on the second ring. There was a meeting in March, she said. Your Aunt Park Sung-ho. Yuna's father on video call from Seoul. They planned all of it 4 months in advance. I have a source who was in the room. Silence on his end, not the surprised kind. The kind that meant he was integrating something he had suspected, but hadn't been able to confirm. Your aunt called me, Imani said. She wants to meet tomorrow. She's offering to tell me everything she knows in exchange for not being the one still holding this when the rest of it breaks. More silence. I'm meeting with her, Imani said. I'm not asking your permission. I'm telling you because you need to know, and because whatever she tells me tomorrow morning is going to inform what happens next. She paused. And what happens next is going to be my decision, not yours. Mine. Joon-Hyuk was quiet for 4 seconds. Okay, he said. I need you to stay out of it until I tell you otherwise. Another pause. Okay, he said again. I mean it. I know you do, he said. I'll stay out of it. She hung up. She started the car. She drove home. She did not sleep well. She did not expect to. She lay in the dark of her apartment while Deja slept on the other side of the wall, and she stared at the ceiling and went through everything, every piece of it, every timeline, every name, every document in the envelope she'd read at the kitchen table at 1:30 in the morning before making herself stop and try to rest. At 6:47, her phone buzzed. The text from Soo-jin. 4 names. 3 she already knew. 1 she didn't. She read the unfamiliar name twice. Then she sat up in bed, feet on the floor, and she understood with the clarity of someone who has finally found the load-bearing wall of a structure they've been trying to understand exactly what she was walking into in the morning. And she understood, for the first time, since she'd pressed those latex gloves into the trash at the end of the evening, that what was about to happen was not about the job. It was not about one bad night at a dinner in Bel Air. It was about what happened when someone decided you were small enough to build a plan around, and then found out they were wrong and you had the documents to prove it, and the morning to use them, and nothing left to lose that you weren't already prepared to lose. She got up. She made coffee. She opened the envelope on her kitchen table in the early light of a Friday morning, and she started reading from the... She read for 2 hours, not quickly, not skimming. She read the way she approached a recipe she'd never made, before slowly, with attention to each component, understanding that the order of things mattered as much as the things themselves. She read every complaint document, every staff report, every notation, Mrs. Cho had made in her precise compressed handwriting at the bottom of incident forms that had never been meant to reach Imani's hands. She made notes on the back of an envelope from her utilities drawer, not on her phone, on paper, because paper didn't autocorrect and didn't back up to a cloud and couldn't be accessed by anyone who wasn't sitting at this table. By 8:43 in the morning, she had a timeline. It started on March 11th. She could see it now. Reading backward through the documents, seeing the pattern, the way you see a picture, emerge from static once you know what you're looking for. The first fabricated complaint had been filed on March 19th, 8 days after the meeting Soo-jin had described. 8 days to construct the first piece, plant it, and route it through the complaint system in a way that looked organic. They had been careful, not careful enough. The 4th name on Soo-jin's list, the one she hadn't recognized, was a woman named Clara Whitfield. She had run a quick search at 2 in the morning before forcing herself to sleep. Clara Whitfield was a talent agent, residential staffing, high-end private household placements, based in Beverly Hills. She ran a boutique operation, small roster, exclusive clients, the kind of agency that didn't advertise because its clients didn't want it to. She was, based on 45 minutes of internet research at 2 in the morning, the person who would have had the technical knowledge and the industry access to construct a flag in the staffing system that looked legitimate. She was also, and this Imani had found in a trade publication profile from 2 years ago, a former business partner of Yuna's father. The circle was not large. That was the thing about a plan built by people who trusted only their own network. It was precise, but it was small. And small meant traceable, if you had the right documents and the right morning. Imani showered. She dressed in clothes she chose deliberately, not her chef's uniform, not the kind of outfit that put her in a category before she opened her mouth. Dark slacks, a clean white button-down, the jacket she'd worn to the estate interview 2 years ago. She looked at herself in the bathroom mirror for 3 seconds, not checking her appearance, just looking at herself, confirming she was still there. She picked up the envelope. She drove to the address Soo-jin had texted at 6:47. It was a hotel restaurant in Century City, neutral ground, which told Imani that Soo-jin had understood the assignment. Public, populated at 9 in the morning with business breakfasts and hotel guests, no one paying attention to two women at a corner table. Soo-jin was already there when Imani arrived. Seated with her back to the wall, coffee in front of her, wearing a charcoal blazer and the same straight posture she'd carried through the dining room the night before. She looked, Imani thought, like someone who had not slept well, but who had made the decision to present as though she had. Imani sat down across from her. She did not say good morning. She put the envelope on the table, not opened, just present, and she looked at Soo-jin directly. You said you'd tell me everything, Imani said. Soo-jin looked at the envelope, then at Imani. Yes, then start from March. Soo-jin wrapped both hands around her coffee cup. She had elegant hands. Imani noticed the kind that had probably worn expensive rings for 40 years. She held the cup the way people hold things when they need something solid. March 11th, Soo-jin began. Yuna came to me. She had been at the estate the previous week for a menu tasting. You were running it, I believe. I remember, Imani said. She didn't say it warmly. She said it because accuracy mattered. Joon-Hyuk had mentioned you during a family dinner the week before. He mentioned the way you'd handled a dietary situation. One of his men had an allergic to something at a previous event, and you'd caught it before it escalated. He mentioned it as an example of competence. Soo-jin paused. But the way he mentioned it, my nephew does not discuss his employees. He manages them, he expects from them, but he does not discuss them. The fact that he mentioned you at all registered. And Yuna. Yuna heard it differently than I did. She came to me 11 days later. She had looked into things. Soo-jin set the cup down. She had pulled the security logs from 2 estate events. She had identified the footage from the kitchen and the common areas, and she had watched it herself. Imani said nothing. She did not find anything inappropriate. Soo-jin said, and there was something in her voice when she said it, not quite regret, more the specific discomfort of a person acknowledging that the action was disproportionate to the evidence. There was nothing to find. But she had already decided that the potential was there, and in Yuna's experience, potential is treated the same as fact. So she came to you, Imani said, and you agreed to help her. I agreed to help manage a situation, Soo-jin said. Those are different things in my mind. I understand if they are not different to you. They're not, Imani said. Soo-jin accepted that. She didn't flinch from it. That, Imani thought, was the one thing about the woman that she could almost respect. She didn't deflect. She was self-serving in a completely open way, like someone who had stopped pretending that self-interest needed better packaging. Park Sung-ho came in, because he had done similar work before, Soo-jin continued. Quiet management of information. He was trusted by both the Seo family and Yuna's father, which made him the practical choice. The plan was for him to construct complaints through channels that routed back to legitimate grievance pathways. Nothing that would look fabricated on its face. Nothing that couldn't be explained as management concerns if it was ever reviewed. She paused. Clara Whitfield came in for the final stage. She had the industry access to place a flag in the staffing system that would survive scrutiny. The intention was that it would only be activated if you left voluntarily as additional insurance that you didn't resurface in this family's orbit. Insurance, Imani said. Yes. You built a 4-month operation, Imani said, to ensure that a chef who had done nothing wrong could not find comparable work in Los Angeles. Soo-jin was quiet. Say it, Imani said. I need to hear you say it. Soo-jin looked at her. Yes, Imani sat with that for a moment. Just a moment. She had known it since the voicemail, since the 4th name, since 2:17 in the morning reading complaint documents at her kitchen table. But there was a difference between knowing something and hearing it confirmed by someone who had been in the room. Something settled in her chest when Soo-jin said yes. Not peace. The specific weight of a thing being made true by acknowledgement. What did tonight exceed, Imani said. You said in the voicemail that tonight exceeded what you agreed to. The public humiliation, Soo-jin said. The gloves. The apron. The photographs. She pressed her lips together for a moment. That was Yuna's own. We had agreed on a documentation approach. Quiet, procedural, deniable. What Yuna did last night was emotional. Was personal, and it made everything visible that was supposed to stay invisible. A pause. She made it a story. We did not want it to be a story. You wanted it to be a quiet disposal, Imani said. Yes. That's worse, Imani said. What Yuna did was cruel. What you planned was cruel and careful. That's worse. Sujin didn't argue. She looked at the table. Perhaps. Not perhaps. Another silence. The restaurant moved around them. A server appeared, filled Imani's water glass, without being asked, disappeared. 2 tables over, a man in a suit was talking into an earpiece. Somewhere in the hotel above them, a door closed. The ordinary machinery of a morning. What are you going to do? Sujin asked. Imani looked at her. I'm going to need 2 things. Sujin waited. A written statement, Imani said. Everything you told me this morning. Signed, dated. Specific names, dates, what was agreed to and by whom. You can have your attorney draft it, or I can give you the framework. But it needs to exist on paper before I leave this table. Sujin's expression shifted. Something moved through it that looked almost like relief, which Imani found interesting. Sometimes the thing people most wanted was to put something down. Even people who had done damage. Especially them. And the second thing? Sujin said. Clara Whitfield's direct contact information. Not a general number. Her personal line. Why? Because she is the one who has the technical ability to remove what was placed in the staffing system, Imani said. Not suppress it, not flag it as disputed, remove it completely. She built it. She can dismantle it. She paused, and she is going to want to, when she understands the alternative. Sujin was quiet. You're going to speak to her yourself, she said. Yes. She won't. She will, Imani said. When she understands that I have a signed statement from a SEO family member describing the construction of the plan and her specific role in it, and that the alternative to a private conversation with me is that statement becoming part of a formal complaint to the staffing industry's licensing board. She looked at Sujin. I've looked up the licensing board, the complaint process, the sanctions for constructing fraudulent professional flags. She paused. It's not a small thing. Sujin looked at her for a long moment. You did all of this since last night, she said. Yes, Imani said. You researched, identified the structure, and came here with a complete strategy. Yes, something moved across Sujin's face. Not admiration exactly. Something more complicated. The expression of someone revising an assumption they'd been holding without examining it, revising the assumption that a woman who had stood in a dining room holding a maid's apron was someone whose reach had limits. All right, Sujin said. She reached into her bag and produced her phone. I'll have my attorney begin drafting. He can have something to you by end of day. By noon, Imani said. A pause. By noon, Sujin said. She sent a text. Imani watched her. Send it not looking over her shoulder, just watching the action, the deliberateness of it, the specific capitulation of a woman who had come to this table, holding cards, and was now understanding that the hand across from her was better. Sujin wrote down Clara Whitfield's number on the back of a business card. She slid it across the table without making eye contact. Imani picked it up. One more thing, Imani said. Sujin looked up. The pastry chef, Imani said. Miguel Rios. He filed a report in October disputing the contamination complaint. I need documentation that that report was filed, that he went to Mrs. Cho and that his account was accurate. He shouldn't carry any residue of this in his record. Sujin was quiet. He's not part of this agreement. He is now, Imani said. He defended the truth when he didn't have to. He did it without telling me, which means he did it without expecting anything from me. That gets protected. A fine, Sujin said. In the statement. In the statement. Imani picked up the envelope from the table. She stood. Sujin looked up at her. What happens to my nephew, she said. In your version of how this ends. It was the first question the woman had asked that didn't have a clear strategic purpose. It was, Imani thought, an almost human question. The kind that came from somewhere underneath the calculation. That's not my story to tell, Imani said. What happens to Joon-Hyuk is between him and the choices he makes. She paused. He canceled the wedding because of who Yuna was when she thought no one was watching. That has nothing to do with me. It never did. Sujin was quiet. He's going to be fine, Imani said. People like him are generally fine. She left the restaurant. She sat in her car in the parking structure and called Clara Whitfield's number. It rang 4 times. Then a voice professional, slightly guarded. The voice of someone who screened calls and was deciding in real time whether this one warranted full attention. Whitfield. Ms. Whitfield, Imani said. My name is Imani Brooks. I'm a private chef currently employed by the CO household in Bel Air. I'm calling because you placed a fraudulent flag in a staffing industry database under my name approximately 12 hours ago, and I'd like to discuss how we're going to remove it. Silence. I don't know what you're referring to, Whitfield said. I have a signed statement, Imani said, from Papardi, who was present when your involvement in this plan was arranged. I also have documentation of the flag's construction timeline that traces back to access points consistent with your agency's credentials. She had the first part. The second she was confident enough in to state without qualification. I'm also aware of your previous business relationship with Unibek's father, which establishes the connection I'd need to demonstrate to the licensing board if this doesn't resolve privately. Another silence. Longer. Who are you working with? Whitfield said. Myself, Imani said. A pause. I'd like to have this conversation through attorneys, Whitfield said. You can, Imani said. That extends the timeline and increases the number of people who become aware of the details. I'm offering you a conversation that stays between us and resolves today. She paused. The flag comes down completely today. I receive written confirmation from the 3 agencies it was sent to that their records have been cleared. In exchange, the statement stays where it is, and this ends privately. Whitfield was quiet for a long time. If I agree to this, she said slowly, I need assurance that. You're not in a position to negotiate terms, Imani said. You're in a position to agree or not. If you don't, I file Monday morning. She said it clearly, without heat. The flag comes down today. 14 seconds of silence. Today, Whitfield said. By 5 o'clock, Imani said. I'll need confirmation from each agency. Another pause. Fine, Whitfield said. Imani ended the call. She sat in the parking structure with the phone in her lap, and the morning light coming through the concrete levels in long horizontal strips. She breathed. The good kind of breathing, not the counted, managed kind. The kind that comes when something you've been carrying is finally actually set down. She called Joon-Hyuk. He answered immediately. The flag is being removed today, she said. All 3 agencies. I'll have confirmation by 5. She paused. Soo Jin's attorney is drafting a statement. I'll have it by noon. It names everyone involved, including Park Sung-ho. What you do with Park Sung-ho after that is your decision, not mine. He was quiet for a moment. How did you? He began. I read the documents, she said. I made calls. I was very specific about what I wanted and what the alternative was. A pause. It wasn't complicated. It just required knowing exactly where to push. Another silence. Imani, he said. It was the first time he had used her first name. She noticed it. She filed it. Yes, she said. I'm sorry, he said. Not for tonight, I've already said that. For March. For what was built inside this house, while I was running an operation I thought I understood. For the months you spent not knowing what was working against you. A pause. You deserved better than what you got in this house. She sat with that. Yes, she said. I did. She didn't add anything to it. Not forgiveness, not absolution, not the social lubricant of it's okay or I understand. She just let the truth sit there as a fact. The statement names your aunt, she said. You understand what that means? I understand. And Yuna's father? Yes. I'm not going to shield any of them to protect the family's position, she said. I need you to know that before noon. I know, he said. I'm not asking you to. She nodded, though he couldn't see her. Take care of the pastry chef, she said. Miguel Rios. He filed a truthful report, and it's in the record. Make sure he's protected, he will be. Good. She paused. And Mr. CO? Yes, I'm resigning, she said, a pause. I know, he said. I expected that. I'll send Mrs. Cho the formal letter today. She looked at the steering wheel. 2 years of my life went into that kitchen. I want you to know that I am not leaving because I was beaten. I'm leaving because I choose to. I know the difference, he said quietly. She believed that he did. She hung up. She drove home. She typed the resignation letter at her kitchen table at 11:15 in the morning, in the specific clear light of a Los Angeles Friday, the kind that comes through west-facing windows and makes everything look slightly more defined than usual. She wrote it, formally, professionally, with a start date for the notice period and a list of handover documentation she would prepare for whoever came after her. She included the kitchen inventory. the supplier contacts, the seasonal menu rotation she'd been building for the following quarter. All of it organized, all of it annotated, all of it handed over cleanly. She was not going to burn the kitchen on the way out. She was better than that. She had always been better than that. By noon, Soo-jin's attorney had sent the draft statement. It was thorough. It named all 4 parties. It detailed the March meeting. It described the fabrication methodology and Clara Whitfield's role in the staffing flag. It was, Imani recognized, more comprehensive than she had expected. Either the attorney was thorough by nature, or Soo-jin had decided that halfway was more dangerous than all the way, and had instructed accordingly. Imani reviewed it. She made 2 amendments, one to the timeline, one to the characterization of Miguel's report, and sent them back. The final version came at 1:47. She signed where indicated as a receiving party. She saved 3 copies in 3 separate locations. Then she put the envelope in the drawer beside her bed. The same drawer where her restaurant sketch lived, the one on the back of the utility bill, the logo she'd drawn at 19, and never thrown away. She put the documents beside the sketch. They sat there together, the dream that had been hers for 12 years, and the record of everything that had been done to prevent her from reaching it. Both in the same drawer, both real. She didn't look at the sketch. She closed the drawer. She had calls to return her mother, who had heard some version of the night before from a friend, and had been leaving increasingly urgent voicemails since morning. Deja, who had texted 11 times since 6 a.m. with ascending concern. A woman named Patricia, who ran a small culinary consulting group, and had reached out 6 months ago about a possible collaboration that Imani had filed away for when she was ready. She called her mother first. The phone rang once, and then her mother's voice. Baby. One word. Just that. The specific weight of a mother's voice when she's been worried all night and is trying to contain it into a single syllable. Imani said, "I'm okay, Mama. Tell me everything." "I will. Not today. Today I just want you to know I'm okay." Her mother was quiet for a moment. "Then you eat?" Imani almost laughed. "Almost. Not yet, then eat something first. Then you can decide what happens next." "Yes, ma'am." "Imani." "Yeah. Whatever they said about you or did to you, it's not you. You know that." She sat at the table with her hand flat on the surface. "I know, Mama," she said. She did know. She had known it all night and through the morning. But there was knowing it and there was hearing it in her mother's voice, and those 2 things occupied different places in the body. "I love you," her mother said. "I love you too." She made eggs. She sat and ate them at the kitchen table, in the early afternoon quiet of the apartment. She ate slowly, without her phone, without the documents, without the list of things she was going to have to do in the coming days and weeks. She just ate. The confirmation from the first agency came at 2:11, the second at 3:40. The third Meridian Residential, Clara Whitfield's placement, came at 4:58, 2 minutes before 5 o'clock. The records had been cleared. The flag did not exist. She did not celebrate. She noted it. She saved the confirmations. She moved forward. The weeks that followed were not easy. She had left a job that was the highest-paying position she'd ever held, and the gap between what she'd been earning and what she needed to earn was not abstract. It was visible in her account balance. By the 3rd week, and she spent 4 days being very specific about her finances, in a way that made her stomach tight. She took 2 short-term catering contracts through a network that predated the AEO household's smaller events, less prestigious, the kind of work she'd done years ago, and had no shame about returning to because work was work, and the money was real. She called Patricia. The conversation lasted 2 hours. What came out of it was not a partnership exactly, not yet. What came out of it was an agreement to collaborate on 3 pop-up dinner events over the following quarter. A structure that would let Imani do what she did best in front of audiences who hadn't seen her do it, in spaces she had creative control over, under her own name. The first pop-up sold out in 40 minutes. The second sold out in 22. The third, Imani had increased the capacity, rented a larger space, hired Miguel as her pastry chef because she'd called him 2 weeks after she resigned and asked, and he'd said yes. Before she finished the sentence, the third sold out in 11 minutes and had a wait list of 64 people. The food press noticed. Not the celebrity press. Not the kind that had covered the engagement dinner through the back channels of industry gossip. The food press. The people who wrote about what was actually on the plate and what it meant about the person making it. 2 publications ran pieces. Both of them used her full name in their headlines. Both of them noted that she was an independent operator who had walked away from a prominent private household position to build something of her own. Neither of them knew the real reason she'd left. She didn't correct the story. The story that existed in print was the one she'd chosen private chef, with a vision, going independent, taking risks. It was accurate in the ways that mattered. The things that had happened in that dining room, the gloves, the apron, the 4 months of fabrication, the March meeting, the 11 seconds silence before Joon-Hyuk said her name. Those things lived in the drawer beside the restaurant sketch. They were hers. She was not going to hand them to an audience that hadn't earned them. She opened the restaurant on a Thursday, not a Friday or Saturday Thursday, because she'd read enough about new restaurants to know that soft openings on quieter nights gave you room to find your footing before the volume hit. She had 22 seats. She had a bar counter with 6 stools. She had a kitchen that she had personally configured and a walk-in refrigerator that she had negotiated the price on through 3 conversations and 1 very specific email. She had a liquor license that had come through 17 days before opening, which she had experienced as a gift she refused to take for granted. She had $81,000, not 47, not 53, 81. The pop-ups had returned more than she'd projected. The catering contracts had been steady, and she had not spent a single dollar she didn't need to spend in the months between the night at the Sedio estate and the morning she signed the lease. She had done it herself. That was the part she held on to. Not as a statement, not as something she intended to tell anyone, just as a private fact. She had gotten there herself. Sat at table 7. The mother sat the one with the best angle on the open kitchen, the one where the light fell warmly in the evening, and you could see the chef moving without feeling like you were watching a performance. She sat there in a dress she'd bought for the occasion, and she looked at the kitchen where her daughter was working. And she did not cry, because she was the kind of woman who considered crying in public a personal policy violation. But her hands, clasped on the table, held each other tightly. Miguel came out of the kitchen at 9:15 to check on the last dessert service, saw her, and went back to his station about what he'd seen in her face. He understood kitchens. He understood what they meant to the people who ran them. The reviews came in over the following weeks, quietly at first, then building. Not the overnight viral phenomenon that restaurants in Los Angeles sometimes became the ones that existed for 3 months and then collapsed under the weight of their own hype. The slow kind, the kind that meant something. The regulars who came back. The reservations that started booking out 2 weeks in advance, then 3. The foretop on a Tuesday night who'd driven 40 minutes because a colleague had told them it was the best meal she'd had in 2 years. Imani cooked every service. She did not delegate the kitchen to someone else while she managed the front. She was in it at the stove, at the pass, finishing plates with the attention she had always given them. In this SEO estate kitchen, and in the pop-up spaces, and in the catering vans, and in the tiny apartment kitchen where she'd been working out new recipes on Sundays for 12 years. She was there, fully there, the way she had always been fully there. The evening Joon-Hyuk came was in late November, 3 months after the restaurant had opened. She knew the date because it was a Thursday, the same day of the week she'd opened on, and she had developed a particular affection for Thursdays because of it. She was at the pass when she saw him. He was at the door. No bodyguard, she registered that immediately. No security presence she could identify. He was wearing a dark jacket, and he had not called ahead. He was standing the way you stand when you're not sure of your reception and are trying not to make that visible, but not quite succeeding. Every table was full. The 6 counter stools were full. She looked at him from across the room. He was across the restaurant, and she was behind the pass. And there was a full dining room of people between them, and she held his gaze for a moment, just long enough to establish that she had seen him and was deciding. She did not feel what she'd expected to feel. She'd thought about this. She had thought about what she would feel if he came, whether she'd want him to come, whether the sight of him would unpack anything she'd been keeping packed. She had thought about it enough to know that she was thinking about it too much and had filed it away on purpose. What she felt, seeing him standing at the door of the restaurant she had built, was something simpler than she'd anticipated. It was the feeling of a chapter that had been open for a long time arriving, quietly at its last page. She came out from behind the pass. She walked to the door. He looked at her and said nothing. He waited because he had understood somewhere in the months between the dining room and this doorway that waiting was what the situation required of him. Every table is full, she said. I can see that, he said. There's one stool open at the counter, she said. You'd have to wait for it. He looked at the counter. The one empty stool at the far end, beside a woman who was reading a book and paying attention to no one. How long, he said. Maybe 20 minutes, she said. He looked at her. I'll wait, he said. She looked at him for a moment longer. She was looking for the thing she was not sure. She would find the thing that would tell her whether he was here, for a reason that was his or a reason that was hers. Whether this was a man who had come to a restaurant for food or a man who had come to a doorway for something else and was using the food as its container. What she found was harder to categorize. A man standing outside a door he hadn't built, waiting for whatever came next without trying to negotiate its terms. That was all. She could have told him to look for something in it beyond that, and she would have been doing what people did when they needed a moment to be more than it was. She stepped aside. She pointed to the single empty stool at the counter. You can wait like everyone else, she said. For the first time since she'd known him, since the balcony, since the dining room, since the freeway phone call, since all of it, he smiled. Not the controlled operational expression he wore in rooms he was managing. An actual smile. Small and real and, she thought, slightly surprised by itself. He sat down on the stool. He picked up the menu. She went back to her kitchen. The kitchen was warm and loud with the specific noise of a full-service orders called tickets moving, the hiss of things hitting heat, and the particular percussion of a kitchen that was working at capacity without working at panic. She took her place at the pass. She called a ticket. She checked a plate. She reached for the finishing salt with the automatic confidence of someone who had automatic confidence of done 10,000 times and intended to do it 10,000 more. She did not look back at the dining room. She didn't need to. She was in her kitchen. Her name was above the door. 22 seats, every one of them occupied by people who had sought this place out, who had waited for a reservation, who had come because someone they trusted had told them the food was worth it. They didn't know her full story. They knew her name and her food and the warmth of the room she'd built. That was enough. That was, actually, everything she had ever wanted to be known for what she made, by people who could appreciate it in a space that was entirely hers. She called another ticket. The kitchen answered, and Imani Brooks cooked the way she had always cooked, the way she would always cook completely, without apology, with her whole self present in every plate she sent out into the room where people were finally learning, in the only way that had ever mattered to her, exactly who she was.